No rain comes from heaven. The earth is parched and dry, and all because the Christian churches have bottled up the sky.
China is the oldest continuous civilization in the world. When the civilization faced horrible times during their century of humiliation, they lost ports and their sovereignty to Western nations. This led to large anti Western and anti Christian sentiment in China. The Boxer Rebellion in China from 1899 to 1901 was a revolution born from the resentment of foreign and Christian influence, a violent reaction from the global powers protecting their influence, and a turning point resulting in a series of reforms that reshaped Chinese politics and accelerated the fall of the Qing dynasty and later the anti-foreign policies of the Chinese Communist Party. Up until 1839, the Qing dynasty in China was viewed as invincible by many in the world. Unrest would start in China in the 1800s when the importation of opium began to rise. Following the unrest in 1839, the First Opium War began. China would lose this war. After the loss, both sides would sign the 1842 Treaty of Nanjing. This treaty gave Britain control over many aspects of China, such as the forced opening of 5 Chinese trade ports and other acts that diminished Chinese sovereignty. There would be 14 years of relative peace before the next Opium War. The forces of Britain and France ultimately defeated China, and the 1858 Treaty of Tianjin was signed. As a result, foreign envoys and Christian missionaries were officially allowed in China. This would be one of the reasons why the Chinese traditionalists got very enraged. In 1894, Japan got involved in the Century of Humiliation, after the Qing sent troops to Korea without notifying Japan. Japan then sent troops to Korea, leading to the First Sino-Japanese War, which China lost. Due to their loss, the Treaty of Shimonoseki was signed, and Japan was officially the hegemon in Asia. After this defeat, high-ranking Qing officials tried to make changes to the Qing dynasty. Kang Youwei, a prominent Chinese scholar, had submitted a request to the Guangxi Emperor.
The consequences of clinging to the past and the effects of opening up new ways are thus obvious. If your majesty, with your discerning brilliance, observes the trends in other countries, you will see if we can change, we can preserve ourselves. But if we cannot change, we shall perish.
And the 100-day reform of China had begun. Empress Dowager Cixi couped the Guangxi emperor, leading to her in control. Between 1843 and May of 1900, it was reported that at least 43 violent riots had taken place in China. Additionally, around this time, a famous book called Death to the Devil's Religion was circulated in China in enormous quantities. The book demonized Christians, referring to them as pig goat devils, dehumanizing them. Additionally, around 1898, an anti-foreign group named the Society of Righteous and Harmonious Fists, also known as the Boxers, formed. They received the name Boxers since they went around and did martial arts tricks to impress and recruit people. They preached about being invulnerable and having superpowers, but these tactics were nothing more than snake oil. The Boxers also went around killing missionaries and destroying churches. Seeing the Boxers rebel in violent ways inspired multiple countries to fight it back against the Boxers. The countries that fought back were known as the Eight Nation Alliance. The Eight Nation Alliance was made out of different troops from the countries Great Britain, France, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Italy, the United States of America, Russia, and Japan. After the Second Opium War, in Peking, modern-day Beijing, there was a litigation quarter formed which contained diplomats from around the world. The rise of the Boxers threatened this area and the diplomats inside the quarter. On May 30th, 1900, after the Boxers kept rising up and feeling disappointed with the fight of the Chinese soldiers, British Minister Claude MacDonald had requested a defense force to protect the legions. While the defense force was on its way, the Boxers continued their havoc. On June 5th, 1900, the Boxers cut the railroad line at Tianjin, causing Peking to be isolated. 5 days later, on June 10th, was the official start to what is referred to as the 55-day siege of Peking. On June 13th, Boxers had made their way to the litigation quarter. At first, 2 Boxers were present carrying swords around. One of them was arrested, while the other managed to escape. A day later, the Boxers had returned for a second round. In Peking, around 1,000 Boxers armed only with swords surrounded it, and the Boxers also burnt churches in the surrounding area. On the same day, the Empress had issued an edict supporting the Boxers and declaring war on the foreigners. Some journalists claim that her acts were directly anti-Christian, with one saying,
The edict represents the Empress as waging irreconcilable warfare with Christians and foreigners.
A day later, on June 20th, the German minister von was killed. A Manchu bannerman named En Hai had killed him under orders of Prince Tuan. En Hai said that he was ordered to kill any foreigner he sees, and that he killed Von without realizing that it was him. And even though there was a lot of violence before, the day of Von Kelter's death was a point where violence escalated on the legations. Minister Condra had stated,
There was scarcely an hour during which I was not firing upon some part of our lines and to some of the legations, being from a single shot to a general and continuous attack along the whole line.
battles were not just fought in Peking. One of the most significant battles during the war between the Eight Nation Alliance and China was the Battle of Tianjin. The Eight Nation Alliance had besieged the Boxer-held city of Tianjin, taking it with heavy casualties on both sides. On July 17th, the Qing troops had stopped firing. This essentially meant a ceasefire between Eight Nation Alliance and the Qing. Even though the Qing had stopped fighting, Boxer attacks were still ongoing. The Qing had a ceasefire for a total of 27 days before they started their fire again. On August 13th, knowing that the relief force was close, the Qing made one last attempt at killing the Allied soldiers. At 4 p.m., the Qing said that they would cease fire, although this was a lie. 5 hours later, they launched their most brutal attack, which went on for all night. But around 4:30 a.m. on August 14th, the relief force had finally landed at the legations.
The Sikhs keep pouring up to the gate, which they soon smashed in, and the hurrahs that rent the skies, that told in the houses and in the hospitals that the siege was over.
After the war, Qing and the foreign powers would sign the Boxer Protocol. This treaty outlined the reparations the Qing would have to pay, including roughly $132 billion USD today in silver. The litigation quarter was transformed into a foreign land, and they were forced to destroy all forts along the southern coast all the way up to Peking. China's Foreign Affairs Office was replaced with an office ranked above other government boards, and this led to heightened nationalist sentiment and widespread anti-Qing sentiment. Beijing was also occupied with soldiers from the foreign litigation committing mass acts of violence. A missionary named Luana Meyer said,
The conduct of the Russian soldiers is atrocious. The French are not much better, and the Japanese are looting and burning without mercy.
the Qing continued to decline after the protocol was signed, and the rebellion significantly weakened the Qing's dynasty's authority and legitimacy. In response to the crisis, the Qing government initiated a series of reforms, including modernizing education, the military, and taxation. Although, within 10 years after the Boxer Protocol was signed, there were over 1,700 revolts in China, all weakening the Qing's power. This would culminate in the 1911 revolt by the nationalists led by Sun Yat-sen overthrowing the Qing. China was set into a period of warlords and fighting. The Boxer Rebellion influenced this era via continued anti-foreign sentiment in China. In 1919, the nationalists formed the Kuomintang KMT Party with its president Chiang Kai-shek. In 1927, the Chinese Communist Party started a revolt against the KMT. The CCP was against foreign influence, just as the Boxers were before them. They continued the revolution until 1939, when Japan declared war against China once again. The communists and nationalists decided to work together to defeat the invading force again, invoking anti-foreign influence. The alliance won this war, and the Civil War continued in 1945. The communists defeated the KMT with high casualties, kicking them out of mainland China and sending them to Taiwan. After the victory, the communists declared the People's Republic of China. During the speech, Mao proclaimed the PRC, saying,
The Chinese people have stood up.
invoking the Boxer rebels. In modern times, the CCP has continued to exert anti-foreign influence, pushing autocracy and strengthening isolationist policy. Overall, the Boxer Rebellion was a turning point in Chinese history and forced China to modernize, pushing the fall of the Qing and the rise of both the nationalists and the communists. It was a revolt born from the resentment of foreign and Christian influence, a violent reaction from global powers protecting their imperial interests, and made China enact a series of reforms that reshaped Chinese politics and accelerated the fall of the Qing dynasty and later the anti-foreign policies of the Chinese Communist Party.
人民也绝不允许任何外来势力欺负、压迫、奴役我们。谁妄想这样干，必将在14多亿中国人民用血肉铸成的钢铁长城面前碰得头破血流。